The city never slept, but at 2 in the morning, even Manhattan seemed to hold its breath. 47 floors above the streets, Vivian Sterling stood at her office window, a glass of Cabernet Sauvignon, catching the amber glow of the skyline. She'd paid $3 million a year for this view. The silence came free. Her reflection stared back, sharp cheekbones, designer suit still crisp, despite 16 hours of wear. Dark hair pulled into a bun so tight it gave her headaches. She looked successful. She looked powerful. She looked alone. Her phone buzzed. Marcus Chen, her CFO. The message was brief. IPO meeting 7 a.m. Board wants answers on Q3 projections. Get some sleep, Viv. Sleep. When had she last slept through the night? Vivian couldn't remember. 5 years since Richard died. 5 years of filling the void with mergers, acquisitions, and quarterly reports. On her desk sat a photograph in a silver frame, her wedding day 12 years ago. Richard's smile was genuine, infectious. Hers was too back when she remembered how. He'd whispered something to her just before the photographer clicked the shutter. You'll achieve everything, Viv. Just don't lose yourself. She'd achieved everything. The rest of his warning had come true as well. Vivian drained her glass, grabbed her Birkin bag, and headed for the elevator. The building would be empty now, just her and the ghosts of deals past. 47 floors below, Garrett Hawthorne sat at the security desk in the marble lobby, his uniform pressed despite the late hour. The building was silent except for the hum of the HVAC system and the occasional click of his pen against the logbook. His phone lit up with an incoming FaceTime call. The screen showed a little girl with messy brown hair and eyes too wise for 8 years old. Daddy! Garrett's entire demeanor shifted. The rigid security guard melted into something softer. Hey, Firefly, what are you doing up? It's past midnight. Willow Hawthorne clutched a stuffed rabbit to her chest. Behind her, Garrett could see Mrs. Patterson, their neighbor, hovering in the doorway. I can't sleep. I keep thinking about Mommy. Can you tell me a story about her? Garrett glanced around the empty lobby, then moved to a corner where the camera wouldn't pick up his location. He sat on the cold marble floor and let himself remember. Your mom loved dandelions. He began, his voice gentle. Everyone else called them weeds, but she said they were wishes waiting to happen. She'd pick them from the hospital courtyard during her breaks, bring them home in little paper cups. Because she was a nurse. Because she saw beauty where other people saw problems. Garrett's throat tightened. She did that with people too. Saw the good in everyone, even when they couldn't see it themselves. Willow's eyes were starting to droop. I wish I could remember her better. I was only 5 when she went to heaven. She's still here, Firefly. Every time you're kind to someone, every time you see something beautiful that everyone else misses, that's her living through you. Daddy, Willow's voice was small, now sleepy. When I grow up, I'll be a doctor like you were, so I can save people like Mommy. The words landed like a physical blow. Garrett swallowed hard. You already saved me every day, sweetheart. Now close your eyes. Dream about dandelions and wishes. Okay, love you, Daddy. Love you more, Firefly. The screen went dark. Garrett sat there for a long moment, then pulled himself to his feet. In his locker, hidden beneath his spare uniform, was a leather portfolio he hadn't opened in 3 years. Inside, a diploma from Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, board certification in cardiothoracic surgery, a letter of recommendation from the chief of surgery at New York Presbyterian, and a photograph. Natalie in a hospital bed, her head wrapped in a colorful scarf, her smile bright despite everything the cancer was taking from her. Willow asleep in her arms, Garrett standing beside them, trying to memorize the moment because he knew how few they had left. $200,000. That's what the experimental immunotherapy would have cost. Their insurance covered the basics, surgery, standard chemotherapy, but not the cutting-edge treatment that might have saved her life. Garrett had sold their house, maxed out every credit card, borrowed from everyone he knew. He'd come up $60,000 short. Natalie had made the choice for him. I won't let you destroy our future for my past, Garrett. Willow needs a father, not a bankrupt martyr. 3 months later, she was gone. 6 months after that, Garrett walked away from his surgical career. He couldn't stand in an operating room, couldn't hold a scalpel, couldn't save strangers when he'd failed to save the person who mattered most. Now he worked two jobs, security guard at night, emergency medical transport during the day, making just enough to pay off the $80,000 in medical debt that remained. The elevator chimed. Garrett straightened as the doors opened. Vivian Sterling stepped out surprised to find anyone still in the building. She walked toward the exit, her heels clicking sharply on the marble. "Ma'am, excuse me." Garrett's voice was polite but firm. She turned irritation flickering across her face. "Yes. I need to see your identification, please. Security protocol after midnight requires verification for all individuals." "Do you know who I am?" Vivian's voice could have frozen water. "I'm the CEO of Sterling and Associates. This building wouldn't exist without my company's lease." "I understand, ma'am, but the protocol applies to everyone without exception." Garrett remained calm professional. "If you don't have your ID, I can call your office to verify." "This is ridiculous. I was just upstairs in my office for 16 hours. "I'm sure that's true, ma'am, but I started my shift at midnight. I didn't see you enter, so I need to verify your identity." "Fine." Vivian dug through her purse with sharp movements. Then she stopped. Her ID badge was upstairs. "I don't have it with me." "Then I'll need to call someone to verify." "This is absurd. I'm standing here in a $3,000 suit and you're treating me like a trespasser." Garrett met her eyes calmly. "I'm treating you the same way I'd treat anyone else. Security protocols exist for everyone's protection, including yours." Something in his tone, the utter lack of intimidation, the quiet dignity made Vivian pause. She'd spent years in boardrooms where people either cowered before her or tried to dominate her. This man was doing neither. "Fine. Call Marcus Chen. He's my CFO." 10 minutes later, Marcus arrived looking concerned. At 55, he still had the energy of someone half his age, though his silver hair told the story of decades in finance. He took one look at Vivian and sighed. "Viv, what are you doing here at this hour?" "Working." "What does it look like?" "It looks like you haven't slept in days." Marcus turned to Garrett. "She is who she says she is. I can vouch for her." "Thank you, sir. I apologize for the inconvenience, Miss Sterling." Vivian didn't acknowledge the apology. She headed for the door, then stopped. Something on the floor caught her eye, a silk scarf Hermes with hand-embroidered initials. V and R. Vivian and Richard. He'd given it to her on their first anniversary. She must have dropped it. The security guard was already picking it up. "You dropped this, ma'am?" Vivian took it without a word, but for a moment their eyes met. And in that moment, Garrett saw something that surprised him. Beneath the ice and irritation was a woman who looked utterly lost. "Get some sleep, Viv," Marcus said gently. "The IPO is important, but not more than your health." She didn't respond. The door spun closed behind her. Marcus turned to Garrett. "Sorry about that. She's under tremendous pressure." "No apology necessary, sir. I was just doing my job." "You handled that well. Most people would have caved the moment she pulled the CEO card." Marcus studied him. "What's your name, Mauricio?" "Garrett Hawthorne, sir." "Well, Mr. Hawthorne, thank you for maintaining protocol." Marcus headed back to the elevator, then paused. "And for what it's worth, she's not usually like this. 5 years ago, before her husband died, she was different, warmer. The work helps her avoid the grief, I think." Garrett nodded. He understood that better than Marcus could know. 3 nights later, the lobby was quiet again. Garrett was reviewing security footage when a young woman entered. She was in her early 20s, dressed in jeans and a NYU sweatshirt, her face showing signs of recent tears. "Can I help you, miss? I'm here to see my sister, Vivian Sterling." Garrett checked his log. "Do you have an appointment?" "I'm her sister. I shouldn't need an appointment." But her voice lacked conviction. "Let me call up to her office." He dialed. A receptionist answered. "There's a Rosalind Pierce here to see Ms. Sterling." "I see. I'll let her know." He hung up. "Ms. Sterling is in a meeting. Her assistant says she'll be available around 10 o'clock. Rosalind checked her watch. 7:30. "Of course she is." She sank into one of the lobby chairs. Garrett returned to his desk but kept an eye on her. By 9, she was still waiting. By 10, her eyes were red-rimmed. At 10:45, Garrett walked over with a bottle of water. "Still waiting." Rosalind took the water gratefully. "My sister, but she's always too busy for me." Her voice cracked. "Ever since our parents died 8 years ago, she became this machine. All work, no life. I'm the only family she has left, and she treats me like an appointment she can reschedule. Garrett sat across from her. Sometimes people work hard to avoid feeling pain. Doesn't mean they don't care. You're just a security guard. Rosalind wiped her eyes. I'm sorry, that came out wrong. It's okay, but I do know something about running from grief. Garrett's voice was quiet. After my wife died, I threw myself into work. 2 jobs, barely saw my daughter. Told myself I was doing it for her. Truth was, I was running. Took my 8-year-old to make me see it. What did she say? She said, Daddy, Mommy wouldn't want you to be sad forever. She'd want you to be here with me. Garrett smiled softly. Changed everything. I'm still working 2 jobs, still struggling, but now I'm present for the time I have with her. Rosalind studied him. What's your daughter's name? Willow. That's beautiful. The elevator chimed. Vivian stepped out, phone pressed to her ear, mid-conversation about derivatives. Her eyes swept the lobby, landed on Rosalind, and something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe. Rosalind stood. For a moment, the sisters looked at each other. Then Rosalind shook her head and walked toward the door. Ross, wait. Vivian lowered her phone. I've waited 3 hours, Viv. I'm done waiting. I was in a meeting. The IPO is in 2 weeks. There's always something. Rosalind's voice was steady, resigned. Mom and Dad have been gone 8 years. You've been gone longer. I just wanted dinner with my sister, but you can't even give me that. She pushed through the door and disappeared. Vivian stood frozen. Slowly she turned to Garrett. What did you say to her? Just the truth, ma'am. Which is, Garrett met her eyes, that you're scared of losing people, so you push them away first. That you're drowning in work because it's easier than feeling what you've lost. That you're running from grief instead of living through it. The lobby was silent. Vivian's expression went through several changes: anger, defensiveness, and finally recognition. You don't know anything about me, she said, but her voice carried no conviction. No, ma'am, but I know what grief looks like. I know what it costs to keep running, and I know your sister is still here, still trying, which means it's not too late. Vivian stared at him. Then without another word, she turned and walked back to the elevator. But this time her shoulders were shaking. The next 2 weeks blurred together. Vivian threw herself into IPO preparations with renewed intensity, using work to avoid thinking about Rosalind's tears, about the security guard's words that had cut too close to truth. Meanwhile, Marcus Chen had been noticing irregularities. Small things at first: Dylan Mercer's personal trades timing suspiciously well with internal information, shell companies registered to addresses that didn't exist. Dylan was Vivian's business partner of 5 years, brought in to help scale Sterling's operations. Marcus started investigating, quietly documenting every suspicious transaction. The pattern was clear: Dylan was positioning himself for a takeover using insider information to short Sterling stock while publicly supporting the IPO. The morning of the board presentation arrived. Vivian woke feeling strange, a tightness in her chest she attributed to nerves. She'd rehearsed this pitch 100 times. $500 million hung in the balance. At 7 o'clock, Vivian stood at the head of the conference table. 16 people sat around it, her senior team board members and Dylan Mercer, looking confident. She opened her laptop, pulled up the first slide, and opened her mouth to speak. The room started to spin. Pain exploded in her chest, sharp crushing radiating down her left arm. The air thickened, refusing to enter her lungs. Vivian gripped the table, trying to breathe, trying to understand what was happening. Ms. Sterling. Someone's voice distant. The lights became too bright. The room tilted. Vivian's knees buckled. The last thing she saw before darkness was Dylan Mercer's face, and she thought she saw a flicker that might have been satisfaction. The security office monitors showed everything in black and white. Garrett was finishing paperwork when the alert came through: medical emergency, 47th floor. He was already running his medical training, overriding everything else. The elevator seemed to take forever. Garrett's mind shifted into emergency mode. ABC's airway, breathing, circulation. He mentally inventoried medical equipment. AED on every floor. First aid kits. Not enough, but he'd work with what he had. The doors opened to chaos. People crowded around someone on the floor. Garrett pushed through. Security, let me through. I'm trained in emergency response. They parted. Vivian lay on the carpet unconscious, her face pale, lips slightly blue. Garrett dropped to his knees, fingers going to her carotid artery. Weak pulse, irregular rhythm, breathing shallow, labored. "Someone call 911 now," he ordered. "Tell them possible cardiac event, 47-year-old female unconscious, weak pulse. 47th floor, Sterling Building, 5th Avenue." His hands moved with practiced precision. He loosened her collar, checked her airway, positioned her head for optimal breathing. Someone handed him the AED. Garrett tore open her blouse and placed the electrode pads on her chest. "Everyone stand back." The AED analyzed her rhythm. No shock advised, but her heart rate was erratic, her blood pressure clearly dropping. Garrett had seen this before during residency. Acute cardiac event, possibly stress-induced cardiomyopathy. How long until the ambulance? 8 to 12 minutes with traffic. Too long. Garrett started modified chest compressions, not full CPR, since her heart was still beating, but gentle rhythmic pressure to support circulation. Between compressions, he monitored her breathing, checked her pulse. This was what he'd been trained for, what he'd walked away from 3 years ago. And in this moment, none of that history mattered. Marcus Chen burst in. "Oh my God, Viv!" "Sir, stay calm," Garrett said, still working. "Does she have any known heart conditions? Any medications?" "I don't know. She never mentioned anything." Garrett nodded, continuing his assessment. Vivian's color was improving slightly, her breathing becoming more regular. She was stabilizing. The paramedics arrived in 7 minutes. They came with equipment and practiced efficiency, and Garrett smoothly transitioned care, giving a precise medical rundown. 47-year-old female found unconscious at 0700. Weak carotid pulse on arrival, respiratory rate, approximately 8 per minute, cyanotic presentation. AED applied, no shock advised. I've been providing supportive compressions for 6 minutes. Pulse stronger now, respirations improved to 12 per minute, color improving. The lead paramedic gave him a sharp look. "You medical, used to be. Well, you just saved her life. This is textbook cardiac emergency response." They loaded Vivian onto a stretcher. As they wheeled her toward the elevator, her eyes fluttered open, confused. Her gaze found Garrett. "You," she whispered. "You were there." "Yes, ma'am. You're going to be fine." "Who are you?" But the elevator doors closed before he could answer. Garrett stood in the empty conference room, surrounded by abandoned coffee cups and scattered papers. His hands were shaking now. He just performed emergency cardiac care for the first time in 3 years, and it had felt like coming home. The hospital room was private, with a view of the East River. Vivian had been awake for 2 hours, enduring tests and a lecture from Dr. Patricia Hammond. "You have a genetic heart condition, Ms. Sterling. Long QT syndrome inherited from your father. Combined with chronic stress and emotional trauma, your heart finally said enough." Dr. Hammond's expression was stern. "You're lucky. Another few minutes without intervention, and we'd be having a very different conversation. Whoever performed first aid knew exactly what they were doing." Now, as visiting hours began, Marcus entered with flowers. Behind him was Garrett Hawthorne. The security guard in daylight looked different. Tired, but there was something in his bearing that didn't match the uniform. "Mr. Hawthorne insisted on checking on you," Marcus said. "I'm fine." Vivian's voice was hoarse. "Thanks to you, Dr. Hammond said you saved my life." Garrett remained near the door. "I'm glad you're recovering, ma'am." "Stop calling me ma'am and sit down, please." He sat, though his discomfort was obvious. Vivian studied him. "The paramedics said what you did was textbook. They asked if you were in medicine. You said you used to be. What does that mean?" Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Then he made a decision. "I was a surgeon, cardiothoracic, until 3 years ago." The room went silent. Marcus's eyes widened. Vivian's breath caught. "A heart surgeon," she said slowly. "And now you're working security." "Yes." "Why?" And so Garrett told them. About Natalie, about the cancer that appeared when Willow was 5. About the impossible mathematics of American healthcare insurance that covered standard treatment, but not the experimental immunotherapy that offered her the best chance. About selling their house, maxing out credit cards, borrowing from everyone. About coming up $60,000 short of the $200,000 they needed. "My wife made the choice for both of us," he said quietly. "She refused to let me destroy our daughter's future, trying to save her present. She said, Willow needs a father, not a bankrupt martyr. So I promised. Vivian's vision blurred with unshed emotion. 3 months later, Natalie died. 6 months after that, I walked away from surgery. I couldn't stand in an operating room anymore. Couldn't hold a scalpel without seeing her face. Garrett's hands tightened. Now I work 2 jobs to pay off the $80,000 in debt that remains. It's enough to give Willow a stable life, enough to keep us moving forward. I built an empire, Vivian whispered. Billions in assets. I could write a check for $200,000 without noticing it was gone, and you lost everything for the lack of it. It's not about the money, Ms. Sterling. Garrett's voice was gentle. It's about a system that puts a price on human life, about how the most important things, love, family, being present, don't show up on any balance sheet. Marcus was wiping his eyes. Vivian couldn't stop staring at this man who'd given up everything and somehow seemed more whole than she'd felt in years. Your daughter, Willow, she's 8. Garrett looked surprised she remembered. Yes, she's fortunate to have you. I'm the lucky one. She reminds me every day why I made the choice I did. He met her eyes. Some sacrifices aren't losses, Miss Sterling. They're love in its purest form. The words detonated something inside Vivian's walls. For 5 years, she'd believed her work, her success, her empire were all that mattered. But she'd been wrong. She'd built an empire and lost herself completely. Lost Rosalind. Lost any chance at connection or joy. She'd become exactly what Garrett had escaped from, someone who measured worth in dollars and forgot that people were priceless. I don't know how to do this, she said, her words fracturing. I don't know how to be anything other than what I've become. Garrett stood, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. Then learn. You're still here, still breathing. That means it's not too late. He left quietly, leaving Vivian and Marcus with the truth hanging between them. Marcus moved to sit beside her bed, taking her hand. Viv. I know, she whispered. And for the first time since Richard's funeral, Vivian let herself cry while someone who cared held her hand and promised she wasn't alone. 2 days later, Vivian was released with strict orders: reduce stress, exercise, moderately take medications, and stop working 80-hour weeks. She took a car home, dreading the return to that expensive, empty space. But when she arrived, Rosalind was sitting on her doorstep with a suitcase. Her sister looked up, eyes swollen from crying. I'm leaving, Rosalind said before Vivian could speak. Her voice was flat, exhausted. I have a job in Seattle. Tech startup. They want me Monday. I already bought the ticket. Vivian's purse slipped from her fingers. Roz. Don't. Rosalind held up her hand. Don't tell me you're busy, or we'll talk later, or you'll make time next month. I've heard it all. For 8 years, Viv. 8 years of next month and after this deal, and when things calm down. But things never calm down. The work never stops. And I'm done waiting to matter to you. You do matter. Then why don't I feel like it? Rosalind's composure shattered. Mom and Dad have been dead 8 years. Richard's been gone 5. And somewhere in all that loss, I lost you too. You're my only family, Viv. My only sister. The only person who shares my history, my blood, my memories of our parents. And you treat me like an inconvenience. The words hung in the air, sharp and true and devastating. Vivian felt something crack inside her chest. Not her heart condition, but something deeper. The armor she'd built, the walls she'd erected, the distance she'd maintained to protect herself from more loss. All of it crumbling. She sat on the floor next to her sister, not caring that her designer dress was getting dirty, not caring about anything except the young woman beside her who'd been alone for 8 years. You're right, Vivian said, trembling. I've been a terrible sister. The worst. After Mom and Dad died, after Richard died, I was so scared, terrified of losing you too, of loving you, and then watching you leave like everyone else. So I pushed you away first. I thought if I didn't let you get close, it wouldn't hurt when you left. But I was wrong. It hurts anyway. It's been hurting for 8 years. And I'm so sorry, Roz. I'm so incredibly sorry. Rosalind stared at her. In 8 years, Vivian had never apologized for anything. I almost died 4 days ago. Vivian continued, tears streaming now. Right in the conference room. My heart gave out from stress and grief I've been refusing to acknowledge. And the person who saved me wasn't a high-priced cardiologist or a board member. It was a night security guard who used to be a brilliant surgeon. He gave up everything, his career, his reputation, his future, to be there for his daughter after his wife died. He works 2 jobs, struggles to pay bills, and he's more successful than I'll ever be because he knows what actually matters. Viv, I've been so blind, so completely blind. I thought success meant building the biggest company, making the most money, proving I could survive without Richard. But I wasn't surviving. I was just existing. And you were here the whole time trying to reach me, and I kept shutting you out. Rosalind's eyes reddened, spilling over. The sisters fell into each other's arms, both crying. Now crying for their parents, for lost time, for all the years they'd spent in the same city, but living in different worlds. They were still sitting there when the elevator chimed and Garrett appeared with Willow. Marcus had called him, explained the situation, and Garrett had brought his daughter because sometimes 8-year-olds understood things adults had forgotten. Willow took one look at the crying women and walked straight over with a small bouquet of dandelions, their white seed heads perfect and fragile. "These are for you," she said solemnly, handing them to Vivian. "My daddy said you were sick and sad. I picked these to make you better. They're not weeds, even though people say they are. They're wishes. My mommy taught me before she went to heaven. She said every seed is a wish waiting to fly." Vivian took the dandelions with trembling hands. They were perfect. "Thank you, sweetheart," she managed. "What's your name?" "Willow Hawthorne. I'm 8 years old. My daddy's the best daddy in the whole world, even though we don't have a lot of money and we live in a small apartment. He says being rich isn't about dollars in a bank. It's about having people who love you and being there for them." Rosalind laughed through her tears. "Your daddy sounds incredibly smart." "He is the smartest. He used to be a doctor and save people's hearts with surgery. Now he saves people in different ways with kindness and truth." Willow looked at Vivian. "Did he save you?" "Yes," Vivian said quietly, looking past Willow to where Garrett stood. "Yes, he absolutely did." Over Willow's head, Vivian and Garrett's eyes met and held. Something passed between them, understanding, recognition, the beginning of something neither was ready to name, but both could feel building. Marcus cleared his throat. "Viv, we need to talk about the company when you're ready. Dylan has called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. He's claiming you're medically unfit to lead the IPO. He's making his move." Vivian closed her eyes. Of course he was. "Let him make his move," she said. "I'll be there." "Viv, you just had a cardiac event." "I'll be there," she repeated. "But Marcus, I won't be fighting for the same reasons anymore." That night in Vivian's penthouse, an unlikely war council gathered. Vivian still pale but determined. Marcus loyal to the end. Rosalind surprised to be included. And Garrett, who tried to leave, but whom Vivian had asked to stay. "Walk me through it," Garrett said. Marcus explained Dylan's tactics. "He spent months manipulating our financial presentation, creating the appearance of mismanagement. Nothing illegal enough to prosecute, but enough to raise questions. He's got 4 of the 7 board members convinced Vivian's medical crisis proves she's unstable. Tomorrow morning they'll vote her out, install Dylan as CEO. And he profits either way," Garrett observed. "Exactly. If the IPO succeeds, he's a hero. If it fails, he's been shorting Sterling stock through shell companies. He makes $20 million either way." Marcus's expression was grim. "I've been documenting everything for 3 weeks. Started noticing irregularities, trades that timed too perfectly with internal information, shell companies registered to fake addresses. When Vivian collapsed and he immediately called this meeting, I knew for certain. He's been planning this for months. The heart attack was just his opportunity." Vivian stared at the papers spread across her table. Her empire. Her life's work for 5 years. And she realized she didn't care about it the way she should. "When I was a surgeon," Garrett said quietly, "we had a saying, when you can't cure the disease, treat the symptom. Dylan's attacking you on financial grounds, on capability. But this IPO, what's it really about? You're not just selling stock. You're selling confidence in Sterling and Associates. Confidence in leadership, in vision and values." Vivian looked up. "What are you suggesting?" "Don't defend the numbers. Don't play his game. Change the entire narrative. Make it about something bigger than quarterly projections." "Make it about people," Rosalind said. about values, about integrity versus profit. Make it about truth, Marcus added. They worked through the night. By dawn, they had a plan. It was risky. It was radical. It had almost no chance of working. But Vivian had spent 5 years playing it safe in business while taking terrible risks with her personal life, and maybe it was time to reverse that equation. At 8 o'clock the next morning, the Sterling boardroom filled with the 7 people who would decide the company's fate. Dylan Mercer sat at his usual spot, confident, his presentation ready. Vivian walked in last. She wasn't wearing a power suit, no armor of Armani, just a simple black dress, pearls that had been her mother's, and an expression of absolute calm. "Let's begin," she said. Dylan's presentation was masterful. Charts showing declining performance, questions about Vivian's decision-making, concerns about her health. He positioned himself as the steady hand Sterling needed. When he finished, the board turned to Vivian expectantly. She didn't open her laptop, didn't pull up slides. She just looked at each of them. "Mr. Mercer is right about one thing," she said quietly. "I have been failing. Not at running this company, our actual numbers are solid, but I've been failing at something more important. I've been failing at being human." The room went silent. Dylan's expression faltered. "For 5 years, I've been running Sterling like a machine. I've been measuring success exclusively in dollars instead of impact. I've been hiding behind work, using this company as a shield against grief. I've been a terrible sister to the only family I have left. I've been so busy building an empire that I forgot why empires matter." She could see confusion on some faces, calculation on others. "4 days ago, I collapsed in this room. I had a cardiac event brought on by stress, by overwork, by years of suppressing grief. I almost died right here. And the person who saved my life wasn't a cardiologist or anyone from my world of success." Vivian gestured to the door where Garrett stood in a borrowed suit. "This is Garrett Hawthorne. He works night security in this building, and he's one of the finest cardiac surgeons this city has ever trained. Johns Hopkins, educated New York Presbyterian, trained on track to become chief of surgery. He could be making $500,000 a year operating on senators. Instead, he works 2 jobs for $40,000 combined. Why?" She let the question hang. "Because our healthcare system failed his wife. Because insurance companies put a $200,000 price on her life and he couldn't meet it. Because when she died, he couldn't work in a system that valued profit over people. So he walked away from everything to be there for his 8-year-old daughter, to choose love over success." Vivian stood. "For 5 years, I've been running this company the opposite way, chasing numbers, chasing growth, chasing a definition of success that means nothing. I've failed my sister. I've failed my employees by treating them like resources. And I've failed the vision this company was supposed to represent when my husband and I founded it, a company that created value for people, not just shareholders." "Vivian, what are you doing?" Dylan's voice was sharp. "I'm telling the truth for the first time in years." She turned to Marcus. "Marcus Chen has been my CFO for 15 years. More than that, he's been my friend, my conscience, the person who's kept this company ethical while I was busy building my empire and running from pain. He's brilliant, he's principled, and he's been covering for my mistakes with grace and loyalty I don't deserve." Marcus looked shocked. "So I'm proposing a change. Not the one Dylan wants, but a real one. I'm stepping down as CEO of Sterling and Associates." The room erupted. Dylan smiled, thinking he'd won. "I'm stepping down," Vivian continued, her voice cutting through the noise, "and recommending that Marcus Chen take my place. He knows this company better than anyone. He cares about it, really cares, not just about profits, but about the people. And he has the vision and character to take Sterling into its next chapter the right way." She looked at Dylan. "As for you, Mr. Mercer, we need to discuss your recent stock activities. Marcus, would you share what you've found?" Marcus pulled up files showing Dylan's shell company transactions, his short positions against Sterling, his bet that the company would fail. "You've been betting against us for months," Vivian said. "Shorting our stock through offshore companies, hoping we'd fail so you could make $20 million while pretending to be our partner. That's not partnership, that's betrayal." Dylan stood, fury replacing polish. "This is ridiculous. You're throwing away a $500 million IPO for sentimentality, for some sob story the board will vote their conscience. interrupted Eleanor Vance, the oldest member, who'd known Vivian since before Richard died. And I, for one, am voting for Marcus, for integrity over manipulation, for a company that remembers people matter more than quarterly reports. The discussion lasted another hour, but the outcome was never in doubt. The final vote was 6-1. Dylan was out, Marcus was in. 6 months later, Dylan Mercer would be indicted by the SEC for securities fraud. He'd settle for $12 million in fines and a 5-year ban from serving as an officer of any public company. But that morning, all he could do was storm out, his scheme crumbling. After the board members left after the paperwork was signed, Vivian found herself on the roof terrace. 47 floors up the city spread out below. Garrett found her there. "That was quite a presentation," he said. "It wasn't a performance, it was truth." Vivian turned to him. "I meant every word. You saved my life. Not just medically. You made me see the shell I'd built, what I'd sacrificed. You gave me permission to be human again. I just told you what someone once told me, that surviving isn't the same as living. Your daughter, she's remarkable. Those dandelions she brought are in a vase on my desk. I look at them every morning and remember what she said about wishes." Garrett smiled, transforming his face. "She gets that from her mother. Natalie always saw magic where other people saw ordinary things." They stood in comfortable silence. "What will you do now?" Garrett asked. "I genuinely don't know. For the first time in 5 years, I have no plan, no strategy." Vivian laughed, the sound lighter than anything in recent memory. "It's terrifying, and it's wonderful. I'm going to spend time with Rosalind. Actually spend time. I'm going to figure out who I am when I'm not hiding behind work. I know that feeling. It's worth it." Vivian looked at him. "Willow's birthday party is next week. She invited me. I'd like to come if that's all right." She'd be thrilled. "Fair warning, it's at a public park, juice boxes everywhere, about as far from a boardroom as you can get." "Perfect," Vivian said, meaning it. "That sounds absolutely perfect." 6 months passed like waking from a nightmare into sunlight. Marcus proved exceptional as CEO. The IPO went forward and exceeded expectations, raising $520 million. Sterling flourished under someone who valued both profit and people. Vivian stepped into a part-time role as strategic advisor, working 40-hour weeks instead of 80+. She used $5 million of her personal fortune to establish the Natalie's Hope Fund, a nonprofit that paid for experimental cancer treatments for families who couldn't afford them. Garrett served on the board, and in 6 months the fund had helped 12 families. Garrett returned to medicine on a limited basis, working 3 days a week at a community clinic in Queens, serving uninsured patients. The medical debt was paid off. Vivian had quietly taken care of it as thanks for saving her life. After his protests, they'd compromised by calling it an interest-free loan, repayable whenever he could, which they both knew meant never. Rosalind had taken a position at Sterling in their newly created charitable giving division, working with both Marcus and Vivian. She and Vivian had dinner twice a week, often more. They were rebuilding what had been broken, and today was Willow's 9th birthday. Central Park was glorious with late spring sunshine, the kind of perfect May afternoon that made people fall in love with the city. The party was simple balloons tied to trees, homemade cake games requiring nothing but imagination and laughter. 20 children ran around while adults supervised from picnic blankets. Vivian sat on one of those blankets next to Garrett, watching Willow organize an elaborate game that seemed to be part tag, part hide-and-seek, part interpretive dance. "She's going to be president someday," Vivian observed. "Or a benevolent dictator. I can't tell which." Garrett was smiling, relaxed. "Thank you for being here. It means the world to her, to both of us. I wouldn't miss it for anything." Rosalind appeared with Marcus, both carrying presents. The CFO turned CEO had become a regular presence in their growing circle, and his feelings for Vivian were no longer quite so secret. She wasn't ready yet, not quite, but the door was open. Marcus had stayed behind at the party earlier, helping Rosalind pack up decorations. Vivian had noticed the way he looked at her sister, not with the patient longing he'd once directed at Vivian, but with something lighter, easier. Something that looked like friendship turning into possibility. She smiled at the thought. Sometimes the best love stories were the ones that surprised you. Willow ran over, breathless and grass-stained. "Ms. Vivian, come play with us." Please. I don't know if I remember how to play tag, sweetheart. It's super easy. You just run and laugh and don't think about anything except having fun. Willow grabbed her hand. Come on. Vivian let herself be pulled to her feet, looked back at Garrett, who was grinning. Go on, he said warmly. We'll be right here. And so Vivian Sterling, former CEO, current advisor, recovering workaholic, ran across Central Park grass, chasing a 9-year-old, while 24 children shrieked with joy around her. Her shoes got dirty. Her hair came loose. She was sweaty and disheveled and wonderfully present. When the game ended and everyone collapsed giggling on the grass, it was time for cake. Willow stood in front of her slightly lopsided masterpiece and closed her eyes. I wish, she said seriously, that we can always be together like this. All of us. Like a real family. She blew out all 9 candles. Everyone cheered. Later, as the party wound down, Vivian found herself walking beside Garrett through the park. The late afternoon sun slanted through trees, painting everything gold. Their hands brushed, then their fingers intertwined. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For showing me there's more than one way to be successful. For proving that the strongest foundations aren't made of steel and glass. Garrett's thumb traced gentle circles on her hand. You did the hard work yourself. I just held up a mirror. Vivian looked ahead to where Willow and Rosalind walked together, the 9-year-old chattering, while the 23-year-old listened with a smile. Marcus walked beside them, carrying leftover cake, part of this strange, wonderful chosen family. I spent 20 years building an empire on the 47th floor, Vivian said quietly, racing toward a definition of success that almost killed me. But I found something real on the ground level with a security guard who taught me that protecting people starts with letting them in. The sun was setting over Central Park, painting the sky in watercolors. Ahead, Willow turned around. Come on, slowpokes, we're getting ice cream. Garrett and Vivian walked faster, still holding hands, part of something bigger than either had built alone. A family. Not conventional, not what either expected, but real and warm and full of dandelion wishes and second chances. At the ice cream cart, Vivian ordered vanilla with rainbow sprinkles because Willow insisted it was scientifically the best combination. She sat on a park bench between Garrett and Rosalind eating ice cream like she had all the time in the world. Because she did. She finally did. That night, after Willow was asleep and Rosalind had gone home to her apartment close to Vivian's, now close enough for impromptu dinners, Garrett walked Vivian to her car. They stood in the gathering darkness, the city humming around them, neither quite ready to say goodbye. I've been thinking, Vivian said, looking at their joined hands, about second chances, about how rare they are, how precious, about how, when you get one, you shouldn't waste it being afraid. Garrett's voice was gentle. What are you saying? I'm saying I spent 5 years grieving Richard, building walls so high that I'd never hurt like that again. And then a security guard with a broken past and a beautiful daughter showed me that walls don't protect you from pain. They protect you from living. They keep out grief, but they keep out joy too. She looked up at him. I'm saying I'm scared. Terrified, actually. But I'm more scared of not trying. Of letting this, whatever this is between us, slip away because I'm too afraid. Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Natalie told me something right before she died, he said finally. She made me promise. She said, don't you dare spend the rest of your life alone because you think loving someone else would dishonor my memory. Love again, Garrett. Love big. Love brave. That's how you honor what we had, by living fully, by being happy, by teaching our daughter that loss doesn't have to mean the end of hope. She sounds like she was extraordinary. She was, and she would have liked you so much. Garrett smiled. Willow already does. Talks about you constantly. When can we see Miss Vivian again? Can we invite her to dinner? Vivian laughed, happy tears in her eyes. I love the pictures she draws. I have them on my refrigerator. And I love dandelions. And I'd love to have dinner with you both as often as you'll have me. That might be a lot of dinners. Good, I want a lot of dinners. I want ordinary moments and grass-stained jeans and homemade cakes. I want all of it. Garrett leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. She leaned in too. The kiss was gentle, tentative, sweet with ice cream and possibility, and the courage it takes to try again after loss. When they broke apart, Vivian was smiling genuinely for the first time in 5 years. I'm still not ready to rush into anything, she said honestly. I need time to heal more, to rebuild my relationship with Rosalind, to figure out who I am when I'm not hiding behind work. I'm not going anywhere, Garrett promised. We've both waited years to feel this, to feel anything real. We can wait a little longer to do it right. They stood there under the emerging stars, holding each other carefully. Two people who'd lost everything, learning to hope again, learning to trust again, learning that second chances are possible if you're brave enough to reach for them. The evening stretched ahead, full of possibility and promise, and the quiet joy of knowing that tomorrow would come and they'd face it together. And for the first time in 5 years, Vivian Sterling wasn't running from her grief or hiding in her work or building walls to keep the world at bay. She was just living, being present, being human, being loved and learning to love in return. And it was enough, more than enough. It was everything.